Hello and welcome to the Comedian's Paradise. This is a podcast where we speak to some of the most intriguing and fascinating creators and performers from across the entertainment and comedy world. Now, today's guest, how can I say, he's an Englishman like me. He's a man who's not from the cities, but from a quiet quintessential village who's gone to America, and he is there. He's interviewed some of the best clowns, including ones that help with your mental health, circus clowns, theatre clowns. He is named Barnaby King. He's a king of clown. He runs so many courses. He's got Clown Spirit. He's got one of the best, how can I say it? They're one of the best clown podcasts in the entire world. Please welcome Barnaby King.
I like that. I've one of the best clown podcasts in the entire world. Oh, maybe it's the only clown podcast.
The best.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it, Marvin. Thanks for having me on.
Now, it's a pleasure to have you here, calling all the way, I'm guessing, from Washington. Is that right?
Well, I'm actually in Oregon, which is I can see Washington State across the gorge from me through my window right here. So I'm right on the edge.
Okay. So you can have a chat with Joe Biden here and then, right?
Different Washington, though.
Oh,
you know.
That's a clown moment there.
Oh, we're getting our Washingtons confused.
Let's make sure that George Washington knows, okay?
Yeah. Or I think they're both named after George Washington. So a fair mistake, I guess.
But that's the reason, yes. Thanks for the say.
Yeah, I'll let you off. But one of them's a giant state, and one of them's just a city. And where I live is in Oregon, which is on the west coast of the United States, bordering the state of Washington and the state of Oregon. So I'm in the beautiful wild west of the United States. Don't ask me how I ended up here. I know that you're going to ask me that now.
So how did you come across in America?
I walked straight into that one, didn't I?
You did.
Well, like all good stories, love is the heart of it. Basically I was, well, do you want the long story or the short story?
Let's do the long story. Let's do that.
All right then. So I was in my 20s and I discovered clowning, and I thought clowning was the best thing. So I decided to make a clown show, and it was called Flawed Genius. And Flawed Genius, by the way, doesn't really translate into American, because if you say flawed in America, they think it has to do with, carpets and vinyl and floors. Flawed, like FLOORED, right? Because of the way that they would say that word, flawed genius. So whenever I say the title of my show, people think I'm talking about flaws, but it's actually FLAW, right? Flaw, which we say the same. So just say floor and floor, Marvin. Do you say them the same?
Floor,
exactly. Floor and floor. But in America, it's flaw.
blah.
So in America, my show is Flawed Genius. So anyway, that was digression. I'm sorry. My show was called Flawed Genius, and I was the flawed genius, and it was a clown show. And I toured the Canadian Fringe circuit back in 2004-ish. And you go east to west, and at the very end, I was in Vancouver, which is on the west coast of Canada, doing my show. And I had these friends who wanted me to come down to Portland, Oregon, to do my show there at the end of the tour. Now, I'd always had this idea of this desire to go to Portland, right? Because I don't know if you've heard about Portland, but it's always had this reputation as being really cool, creative, artsy, hippie kind of happening place. A little bit like you might think of Brighton in the UK. It's kind of got a little bit of that, or Bristol maybe. You know, it's kind of a little bit alternative, a lot of creativity and art and stuff going on. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go to Portland. So I went to Portland and did my show, and you know, there was this woman right in the audience who loved my show, and it just happened that she was also studying performance, and so we took some workshops, went to some workshops together and hung out, and you know, the rest is history. I won't go into too much gory detail, but we spent quite a bit of time together during those weeks, and I went back to England. She came out to visit me in England. She went back again. I came out to Portland again to visit her. We went back and forth quite a bit until the immigration people said, hey, what are you doing? You can't keep going back and forth like this. And we were like, okay, well, we better get married then. So we got married, and I ended up moving to America. You know, and this was in some ways a great idea, right? Because life is an adventure, and you just seize the day, right? Carpe diem. I mean, that's always been my philosophy. It's like, if a door opens, go through it, because it's fun. See what's going to happen, because life is short, and you may as well just take all the opportunities. So falling in love with somebody in America seemed like a great, exciting adventure. But then there's that tricky element to it, which is, that means that one of us always has to live in a country that's not our home. And it's always felt a bit like that. And so we lived for a while in Chicago. I did a PhD. You can come back and ask me about these things later if you want, because they're kind of interesting in themselves. But I did a PhD in performance studies, and clowning was my topic, sort of research. And I studied clowns in Colombia, in particular, in South America. So there's this whole South American adventure that I went on. And then we came back and lived in the UK for a while, and I taught clowning in the university. And then 4 years ago, we went to Colombia with, by now we have kids, by the way. I missed out that part, but we have kids. We went to Colombia for a year with the kids so that they could learn Spanish. And then guess what? COVID hit, middle of whenever that was, 2019. And we've managed to get out of Colombia miraculously and went to the States, and we've been here ever since. So we've been here for about 3 years. And the short version of the story is, you know, I'm married to an American. That's why I'm here.
That's what happens, guys. See, this is what clowning does. It makes you find love.
Yeah. I mean, when I first met this woman, it was actually I met her before she'd seen the show, and we kind of liked each other already. She knew she liked me, and she told me afterwards she was really scared that she wasn't going to like the show when she came to see it, because if she didn't like the show, there was no way that, you know, we could date. And so I was really lucky, I guess, that she laughed a lot and she really liked the show. And it wasn't, because I think this is the thing, Marvin, people have this expectation of this idea about clowning and what it is. And there's, particularly in America, there's a lot of associations around creepiness and scariness of clowns. And so when people see my clowning, or they take my clown workshop, or they see my stuff online, they're often seeing something that's very surprising to them, and a different side of clowning that they're not expecting.
And what was so you mentioned before that how clowning have you found loves it, so helped you and it's brought you kids as well. It's brought you a lot of things. But what was the thing that made you become a clown? Did you go to a circus and that was it, you were amazed by the silliness of it? Or what was the thing that made you go, right, I want to be a clown?
Yeah. You know, I'm going to get really psychological on this one, because I do ask myself that question quite often. There wasn't any real obvious moment where I saw a clown and loved them, or, you know, I didn't grow up loving clowns on the screen or in life particularly. But I think I did, like, I always was involved in theater and acting and performing. So I love sort of being on stage. And there was something about being able to captivate an audience and hold an audience on my own that's really, what's the word? Exciting, compelling, addictive, terrifying. You want to keep doing it, and it's a very compelling, exciting experience, right? You know this as a solo performer, when you've actually got the audience there in the palm of your hand and they're with you and you're connected with them. It's a kind of transcendent, sacred experience. I think in some ways it's a little bit like being a priest or a shaman or some spiritual or religious leader or figure, like the way that there's this kind of like transcendent, transformative ritual that you're kind of engaged in together, and you're not manipulating people, but you're leading them through this transformative experience that lasts an hour or even if it's just 10 minutes, whatever. It's a very unique and privileged position to hold, being that one person on stage. And when I so really the turning point was when I took this one clown workshop with Sue Morrison. And she's somebody that's worth talking to. She's based in Toronto, and she learned her clowning from a guy named Richard Pachinko in the 80s. And Richard is quite well known in Canada and the US. His story is quite interesting because he went to Lecoq and studied with Lecoq and studied that whole kind of mask tradition of clowning and the commedia and so on. And then he came back to Canada and he studied with Native American clown guides and learned a kind of ritual Native American approach to clowning. And he created a method that combines those two things. So you're learning the kind of theatrical side of clowning, but you're also learning this kind of deep channeling of these sacred spiritual energies, and clowning as a kind of deep introspection, and also as a social function, right? That communities and societies need clowns to keep them balanced and cleansed. So in Europe, maybe, and certainly in America, we may have lost touch with this deep resonance and connection and need for the clown. And in Native American societies, that is still, even now, quite present in this figure of the clown. So Richard Pachinko developed this thing and he taught it to various people. And Sue Morrison, who was one of his students, now has her own clown school, and she teaches this thing called Clown Through Mask. And I took his workshop with her in the UK, in Leeds, in like 2000, somewhere around there. And it just transformed my understanding of what clowning even was, right? Because I thought of it, like most people, as kind of just a kind of comedy, or just a kind of children's entertainment, or a circus entertainer, or party entertainer, these kinds of things. And I didn't have any concept of this deeper sacred function of the clown as a sort of spiritual guide, or as a shaman, as a healer. And when I took that workshop and I stood in front of, one of the kind of basic exercises in many clown workshops is putting on the red nose and coming out in front of the rest of the class. And with her, this was a transcendent experience for me when I got to do this. Well, not just when I got to do it, but watching the others do it too. Completely silent, just standing in front of the audience with the red nose and a hat and just breathing and working, looking at people, connecting with them through eye contact, and letting your body just kind of breathe and be and relax and move through these different emotional states. And people would cry. People would get very, very emotional standing up there and cry, or have these crazy kind of epiphanies or experiences. And the audience, as an audience, you're just going through it with them. You're so connected to them. And it's not just about laughter, it's about all this whole range of different emotions. And I realized, oh, clowning is what I've been looking for. It's like theater, but it's connected with this spiritual truth and personal journey. It's so intense and it's so meaningful and powerful. And I just sort of then knew that I felt that was my journey, to kind of pursue clowning as a practice and as an art form. And that's what I've been sort of doing ever since, more and more.
And it's because people have such a big misunderstanding of clowning, and I'll be honest, my understanding of clowning is very limited because I just went to Goli school and I haven't gone into around it. I know that there's, for the classic and the basic, there's like 4 types of clowns or something like that. Like you've got the August clown, you've got the tramp, you've got the clown mask, something like that. And then you got theatre, and you mentioned like circus, and you mentioned how it's therapeutic. Would you be able to break these down for like a layman, like what are the main types of clowns and like how the different types of clowning genres differ?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any one way of distinguishing or separating things, but one way is to think of the function of it, right? Is the function of it to disturb things politically, right? For example, like that's one very old tradition within clowning, is the court jester or the fool, the holy fool, or and Native American clowns fall into this as well. The ability to speak truth to power. And as political protest clowning is still strong today. Robin Hambrook is a person in Bristol who's doing a lot of work around that. There was an organization called Clandestine Insurgent Rebel Clown Army, or CIRCA for short, which existed for a number of years, and I think maybe still exists in some small pockets. And they would go to G8 summits and this kind of thing, big political rally events, and they would clown in protest. So clowning for protest for me is one, or political clowning, you might say, is one big genre or one big area we could talk about. In fact, Marvin, I have a course called the Clown Connection, which is kind of my flagship signature course that I teach online. And there's 8 units. And in a way, each of those 8 units covers a different, the way I see it, a different genre or approach to clowning. So I could go through those. So political clowning is one of those. It's one I cover that in one of the units of the course, political protest clowning. Then another one is this tradition of the sacred clown, which I think lies at the heart of everything, and comes not only out of Native American culture, but many cultures around the world have examples of these sort of sacred shaman clowns, who are kind of like lightning rods for spiritual energies, I would say, and are like the trickster figure in mythology. They are considered both men and gods. They're sort of like go-betweens between the sacred space, the divine, and the earthly. So there's the whole tradition of the sacred or the ritual clown. Then another tradition that I think is very interesting that exists today also is related to the political, but it's more this idea of the jester or the fool. And the jester or fool is often a joke teller. So I think of these as quite closely related to stand-up in a way. I think stand-up is the closest that we have to that sort of tradition today. There's a banter, a wittiness, a spontaneity, and a use of wordplay and language and jokes, and a lot of interaction with the audience. So there's that whole tradition, and I think it's quite interesting thinking about the relationship between stand-up and clowning, which is something you've been exploring. So political, sacred, the jester. Then another area that I cover is called existential clowning. I call it existential clowning. I think you could also call it theatrical clowning. I think it's in a way similar to theatrical clowning, existential clowning. I call it that because I think there's this sort of poetic quality to it. So clowns who are trying to create beautiful things, like a poem is a beautiful thing, right? A theater show that's crafted and it's maybe scripted and it has some props and costume and maybe sound and music, and it's got that theatrical quality to it, of being crafted like a piece of art. It doesn't have that rawness and roughness of street clowning, for example. It's got a bit more of a polishedness quality to it, but also maybe in a desire to speak to philosophical themes or interesting existential themes like love, death, sex, these kinds of things. So there's that sort of existential theater clowning. Then another theme that I cover, which I think speaks more to circus and variety, is logic, clown logic. Now, some clowning is driven by a kind of craft, a kind of technique that has to do with how to make an audience laugh on cue through a series of gags, often physical movements, using the body, using a combination of bodies and props, right? Slapstick. And this draws very much on the tradition of music hall, vaudeville, circus back from the 18th and 19th century, which were, crossing over a lot with vaudeville and music hall. And then into the early 20th century, it moves into the cinema, right? So Buster Keaton, Chaplin, Lloyd, Harold Lloyd, Marx Brothers, all this sort of tradition, Laurel and Hardy, of, I mean, it kind of gets, there's a blurry line with the existential theatrical clowning, but it's more on the slapstick, how do we make an audience laugh side of things. It's entertainment, it's variety, it's in that kind of genre. And you can learn that stuff as a kind of craft, do this, do that, repeat, change, rule of three, how to make an audience laugh with the rhythm, with the tempo of a joke, with the way in the moment that you look at the audience. So that's another category, clown logic. And then I suppose, well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth one that I would mention is therapeutic, right? So this is a relatively new category that's come in, although in some ways it speaks to the healing function of clowns, which has been around for thousands of years. But as a specific genre, hospital clowning is fairly new, maybe since the 70s or 80s. Patch Adams made it very, very famous. This Gesundheit Institute and the movie with Robin Williams. And then a guy called Michael Christensen, who was one of the co-founders of the Big Apple Circus in New York, created a thing called Clown Care Unit, which was a part of the Big Apple Circus. And this was a troupe of clowns who would go out into hospitals and entertain people. And from there, you see a proliferation of hospital clowning all over the world. There's a lot in Europe, there's a lot in Australia, in Canada, Israel. And this is a genre of clowning in itself, which follows its own rules, although I would say very much interconnected with all those other areas. But maybe the thing that defines it is that there's this kind of you okay?
I've got a cough. Don't worry about me.
Have a drink. A little drink of water. Do you want to grab a drink?
It should be okay. Don't worry.
All right. Yeah, so therapeutic clowning, is defined by this environment of being in a hospital and what you have to be aware of in terms of the illness that you're dealing with, or what is ailing the patient, what kind of limits there are around what you can touch, what you can do in that hospital environment. The fact that the doctors and nurses are going around there doing their jobs, and how to support them and not sort of undermine them. It's a very interesting, challenging environment. It's a working environment, and you don't often see clowns doing that. Often clowns are in environments that are set up for them specifically, like a circus ring or a theater. And in a hospital, it's definitely not set up for them. It's a completely working, everyday sort of environment, and the clowns have to figure out how to intervene in a way that's beneficial and healthy in that environment. So, and related to hospital clowning, but still in the category of therapeutic, is all the sort of humanitarian clowning, like Clowns Without Borders, going to work in sort of crisis zones, war zones around the world, and trying to bring a smile, bring laughter, bring lightness to places that are struggling, people that are struggling, which is in a way similar to hospital clowning, but just slightly different. So I don't know if that helps, but I think there's sort of six broad categories: the political, sacred, jester / fool, existential theater clowning, circus logic clowning, and therapeutic clowning.
And what covers to someone who hasn't heard of clown before, and how do they all they're all different categories of clowning, but what is the thing that defines them all? Like, I know I've had a few clowns on the podcast. Some of them say that clowning is when a clown tries to do something that's a little bit outside of their skill level, but they don't know it, but the audience know it, and they try and do it, and then they fail, then they try again, they fail, and they fail even harder. What would be a definition of clowning for yourself that defines all of those different categories? How does it relate to those categories you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not necessarily that cut and dried. I don't think clowning has to be about failure and trying. And it's a question that, even though I've been doing it for a really long time, still pursues me, or I pursue it. I don't know which way around it is, really. Maybe one way of thinking about it is that I think clowning has to do with revealing one's humanity, in particular, the vulnerable, flawed aspects of one's humanity. So obviously the example you just mentioned of failing is one example of that, right? If I try something that's too hard for me and I fail, and maybe I succeed eventually, I'm revealing my flaws, right? I'm revealing some kind of like ridiculous, flawed aspect of my humanity, which a lot of people are going to be able to relate to. But there's lots of other kinds of flaws and vulnerabilities that we have that are common to our humanity and our experience of being human. So, for example, sadness, sadness about things, being overly reacting in a completely over the top, inappropriate way to something. These are all, or thinking that we can change the world by telling a politician or speaking truth to a leader, or just having like a really intimate, beautiful moment with an audience member where we share some deep moment of connection. I think these are all examples of clowning, and they don't have to be funny. They don't have to be about failure. Maybe what they are in a way is going beneath the social expectation, the social norm, kind of breaking that apart and seeing something very naked and vulnerable underneath that makes us feel deeply connected and can make us laugh, because when we realize that we're all the same, we're all feeling and worrying and fearing the same things, then that can produce laughter, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I thought it was just me, and now I see you have the same fear. It can be really funny, or it can be just really profound and stunning, or it can produce tears. So yeah, for me, that's what clowning does. It reveals that deeper humanity that we all have in common, and then we don't necessarily know what reaction that's going to produce.
And that's the challenge of it all, isn't it, as a performer? Because when you repeat it again and again, you lose the connection towards it, and then and the challenge is getting the audience to feel that again and again, and you feel that again and again, despite repeating the same thing again and again.
Yeah, that is a huge challenge. Like, how do you keep it fresh and real every single time, rather than just a mechanical repetition of something? I think for circus performers, that must be a particularly difficult challenge. And in fact, I think probably a lot of clowning does just rely on repetition and not necessarily finding that connection. But I think that's where clowning maybe falls into kind of some of those stereotypes, or ceases to become popular, is where it's just being done in a routine, repetitive kind of way.
You've brought on something that's a very interesting thing, and I think this is alluding away from some of the questions I've asked. But this is what I love about the podcast. You don't know where it's going to go, and you often find a question that you didn't expect to ask. And I think this is one of them. So that people who don't know about clown have a clearer idea. Who are like performers, either they be theatre or circus clown, but also like therapeutic clowns. Who are good examples of those of different genres of clowns, and how do they operate but achieve the same thing?
You mean actual people, actual examples of individuals?
Yeah.
Um, Well, gosh, there's so many. It's a hard question because there's just so many to choose from. In the therapeutic area, um, you know, there isn't anybody that's sort of well known apart from maybe Patch Adams, on the sort of international level. I've seen lots of people do it. I suppose I don't know if you take. Well, here's a good example. There's a guy named Olivier Hugues Terreau, who's French Canadian. I had him on my Conversations podcast, and he clowns mostly for elderly people in senior homes, old people's care homes. And one of the things that distinguishes his clowning is that it's really very, very intimate and caring. And he's really just forging these like beautiful moments of connection with people who have Alzheimer's often, or dementia, and have memories of failing. But he, through eye contact and through just being very, very present and connecting with that person in the moment, he can bring them out of that kind of lost space that they're inhabiting in ways that their nurses and carers say are, incredible. Like they've never seen this person being so present, but so open, so verbal or communicative, for example. So, and I think the key to it, what he talks about in his workshops, is this just being super, super present and connected with that person, and kind of going with them on a journey where that person is as much the leader as he is. So this is important because he's not just bringing some joke or comedy piece or some material that he's created and showing it. He's just coming with himself, right? And the skill is to just be super present, almost Zen-like kind of. And he's actually a Buddhist himself as well. And there's some interesting connections between clowning and Zen Buddhism, I think. And by being super present in that way, by allowing himself to be led and to go on this journey with this individual, there's this transformation that occurs. For me, I think the same can be said for really, really good theater clowning. So here now I'm trying to think of a good example of this. It'll probably come to me in a minute, but I think that when I watch a really, really good theater clown, they have this same quality, that although they've got a piece of material created, what they're doing is being super present in the moment and really going on a journey with the audience, allowing the audience as much as themselves to guide what's happening. Political clowning, I suppose the people that I just spoke of, Circus, the clandestine insurgent rebel clown army, if you watch videos, there are YouTube videos of them, you can see what they're doing is, instead of kind of abruptly criticizing the police or the army or whoever it is that they're kind of clowning with in those spaces, they are kind of, in a way, trying to work to connect with those people. So it has, again, this kind of quality of listening, deep connection, empathy, being very present, being very in the moment, playing a lot, rather than, this is our political message that we want to tell everybody about, and we hate the police, right? It doesn't have that rigidity it has a kind of softness to it, and this ability to kind of mold itself and kind of work its way into the cracks and into the corners of things, and to, it's clever. It's actually very clever and wily, but also very human and beautiful and connected. And I think the same with therapeutic clowning in hospitals, right? You've got to be able to really adapt to the moment, to connect with everybody around you, and not just to see the negative or to get hung up on the structure or the hierarchy or the authority of the situation, but to really to bring love and connection to everything. So I'm sorry I haven't been able to come up with too many specific names of people, because it's like just the pressure in the moment of doing that. But hopefully that gives you a kind of more concrete sense of, for me, what it is that connects all these different kinds of clowning. Oh, I've lost your audio there, Marvin.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
There is some clowning on like I watched a lot of them in Edinburgh, but there's like I know that you've had them on the podcast before, like Viggo Venn, for example. He's a very good. Would you say he's a theatre clown, or like what kind of clown would you describe him as?
Yeah. Well, this is really, actually, thank you for bringing that up, because he's a really good example. So Viggo, and now more examples are popping into my head, so that's good. Viggo is a very good example because he blends a lot of those different things together. And I think the reality is that a lot of clowns are not one of those things. They're not theater clowns or circus or variety or therapeutic. Actually, they're doing a lot of all those things, and they're mixing it up. Because Viggo, on one hand, is kind of a variety performer, right? In Britain's Got Talent, he created these beautiful vignettes, these little 5 to 10 minute pieces that communicated very, very quickly, had a lot of very deliberate timing, deliberately timed comic moments that come from a lot of planning and a lot of experience. He's also reacting very much spontaneously to what happens in the moment, because that was the beauty of those pieces he did, was that he was able to respond to what Simon Cowell was doing, or what the audience was doing, or what was going on around him. And you could kind of see that spontaneity that most performers lack, right? Most performers in Britain's Got Talent or anywhere are just coming out and doing their thing. There isn't a lot of space for improvisation or spontaneity. And it partly because it's extremely difficult and extremely risky, because it can go really wrong if you don't know what you're doing before you come out. But what Viggo has is this ability to, from experience, to work with the moment and what the moment offers. And the clown gods, like the balloon bursting in the wrong moment, or things not going quite right. I think at one point Simon was supposed to not have one of the high vis jackets in the second piece. I think it was. He was deliberately supposed to not have one. Everyone else was going to have one, but he wasn't going to have one. So they didn't put one under his chair for him. But in the actual event, he took one from somebody else and put it on, or was starting to put it on. And it was like, no, that's not supposed to happen. So Viggo actually ran down off the stage and took it off him, which added this sort of interesting dynamic. So in a way, I think he's kind of from that tradition of the variety, and a lot of what Viggo does is bordering on stand-up as well. He has a microphone a lot of the time. He talks, he has jokes, he has verbal stuff. But he also, if you watch his videos on his website, it's very weird theatrical clowning, very existential, very quite profound, some of it, very much in that genre, I would say, of theater and existential clowning. So he's definitely not so political, maybe not so much in the sacred all the therapeutic, but he's definitely kind of in that circus / theater variety kind of area, you know, entertaining people, but with this potential for real depth.
Could I show you a little clip? And this is something that I've never quite understood, but I've always been fascinated by, and I want to get your opinion on it, because it's so being in comedy, there's a little bit of a, like with gong shows, they show a lot of the times you only get through them if you're like a straight stand-up. But Viggo Venn sort of broke the rule book in that he
Yeah, let's get him on. His name's Viggo Venn. Give it up for Viggo, everybody!
At 29 and I find myself wondering what did happen to the last 10. I ran away with my life, fast forward, never turn back again. It's kind of funny that the more we pass time, the more we need to set them rewind. And 19 was the year I had to leave you, but now I'm seeing all the signs.
audible.
That's good.
But thing like so it's 5 minutes. The every comic that I see go on there, they do straight sort of stand up. They do like 5 minutes, joke, joke, joke. But he's the only person that I've really seen, apart from Russell Hicks, where he roasts the audience, who got through it just doing that. And it's intriguing because, like, logically, it doesn't make any sense why it's so funny and brilliant. But when you see it, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it follows some rules. All right. I mean, so for folks listening who couldn't see that, what he's doing is basically a combination of a very tight structure, which consists of, you know, taking off the high vis jackets, and that every time he takes off a high vis jacket, it's a cue. It's a music cue. So the same music comes back, and when the music is playing, he's dancing and kind of being raunchy and kind of putting his bum in people's faces and kind of like doing a little bit of a striptease type of feeling, but goofy idiot. And then he's cutting the music off with this hand gesture, which becomes a kind of repeated joke in itself. And it's very, very tight. It's very important that it's very tight, you know, that the music stops right then, because it creates this kind of moment of suspension and silence. This point fix, right, where he's just like really present with the audience in a space of almost nothing. And then he starts to look for things which are not planned. So everything up to now is sort of planned. But then in these moments where he stops the music, he's looking for opportunities to do goofy things that are not planned. And he just does whatever comes into his head, right? So if he sees something interesting in the audience, he'll grab it. At one point, he just gave a high five to the person on the stage. At one point, what else? Oh, he started playing with the microphone stand and kind of messing with that. And then he takes that for as long as he possibly can. And it's at the point where he feels like the audience, he's starting to lose the audience or starting to lose that momentum, he'll take the next high-vis jacket off. And that's the cue for the next music, for the music to come back in again, right? And he goes back into this familiar, and the whole audience goes, we know this. We've seen this. It's the music thing again, where he's going to be a idiot striptease and do this thing. And then he stops it again. And then you don't know what's going to happen, because he goes into this space of, I'm going to mess with you now. I'm going to do something unexpected and mess with you for a while until you get bored of that. And then I'm going to take off the next one and go back to the music. So it's actually, if you analyze it and break it down like that, it's super simple. It's just this structure with play improvisation moments woven into it. And he's crafted it in that way, I think, to kind of, it's almost like the repetition gives the audience a sense of security so they can enjoy it. When you have a comedian coming on and just telling one joke after another, the audience is always like, okay, but what, I don't know what's coming next, or I don't know if this next bit is going to be funny, or there's no structure to it, no integrity to it, unless that comedian's very clever and it has a way of linking all those jokes in some way. But what he's done is instantly created this character with these defined movements and qualities that we get to know very, very quickly. And then we get to enjoy it as he keeps coming back to the same thing over and over again, but always with some unexpected surprise qualities in these in-between bits. So that, in that sense, it does make total sense why it works, right? Why it's funny.
Because people, this is a weird, wacky, stupid thing, and we're like, what daft thing is he going to do next? But
yeah, and we love repetition, right? There's this clown called Holly Stoppit. You may have heard of her. She's based in Bristol, and she's called Holly Stoppit because she always just repeats things over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until people just say, Holly, stop it. And then she keeps doing it. And she has this, instead of the rule of 3, she has the rule of 53, I think. Like, the more you do something, the funnier it gets, is her logic. And I think there is some truth to that there is a ridiculousness inherent in repeating things again and again and again, because it becomes ridiculous, and we just start laughing because it's so incongruous and ridiculous. So I think the more right, and when he did this in Britain's Got Talent, he went back to ripping off the high-vis jacket like 10 times, maybe, at least. Each time a little bit bigger, a little bit different, but it's still, the audience loves that repetition. And they laugh because they can't believe he's done the same thing again. Like, what? He's just, you could see Ant and Jack backstage being like, what's going on? He's just doing the same thing over and over again. But there's something hysterically funny about repetition.
is there some elements in that in terms of like with acting? Like I did one acting class, and they say you repeat the same line quite a few times to increase the emotional response. You do it so many times that you get really emotional with that line.
Right, maybe, yeah. Like it's sort of like you go beyond the obvious.
Oh, but it was quite a well planned thing from Viggo. Like, first of all, if he's going with a high-vis jacket, doing a funny dance, funny music, he gets people attention first of all, doesn't he? And people were like, oh, what daft things are you going to do next? And because it works, they're like, oh, and then they like that bit. So yes, I see it. So first of all, but he's taken a while to figure that bit out that works, and he plays with it, and he does the bits in between to keep them on their toes, so that they keep watching, and that's why he doesn't get gonged off, because people want to know what daft thing he's going to do.
Yes,
it's like
it's amazing. Did you see his show in Edinburgh?
I did indeed. It was.
What did he do? What was it like?
So he did the balloon thing where he got popped, but he got someone else to do it, and then he up chasing them. It was, I don't know what to say about it. I liked it. It was good, but maybe, yeah, I don't know. I'm not. It was very good. He killed very well when it was brilliant, but maybe because I've seen a lot of his stuff online, maybe I didn't enjoy it as much. But then you said with repetition, maybe you like it more. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think
it's interesting.
didn't see
You
it. I'll
you
probably
could appreciate it maybe as you could appreciate the craft of it. But maybe because it's not surprising to you anymore, it's less funny.
yes, that's what I think happened with me.
Yeah.
And I saw his missus, Julia Masley. I mean, her show was very, very good. She did the same sort of thing as well, where she got her wooden leg out and would play, "Do you have a problem?" And then she'd get someone to say something. She'd get it on stage.
Yeah.
Then there'll be a music cue, and then that was the same sort of thing throughout the show. Yeah, they're incredible clowns, both of them, and they're probably two of the best clowns to have come up from Golia, and they're very slick in what they do. But so many people will think that there isn't any thought or any skill in it. But if you go into it, like you said, there is a lot of thought, and even though it's simple, it's very well executed. It takes a lot to execute things perfectly, like they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any sort of circus clowns that really intrigue you? Because this is one thing that I've really been interested in. I got this book called Clown Scenes, which I'm going to look into, but a lot of the clowns that I come across are all theatre. Well, I know you say they're all similar, but they're based on the genre of they go to Golia or they go to Lecoq and they do clowning. Like they don't necessarily go to a circus school. And I'm intrigued to see how they do things and just see how it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's interesting because circus clowning differs a lot by country and culture. In South America, I've spent a lot of time studying clowns, and the circus clowning is very raunchy and kind of sexy and very, very energetic. You know, the clowns are kind of youthful and they run around and dance a lot. And there's a lot of music in the, live, like they're playing musical instruments and stuff and dancing. The American circus clowns, are very big on sort of, particularly the 3-ring circus, these big, they call it walk-in clowning, where, they've just got basically a few seconds and a big giant prop, and they just make a couple of gags and then they run off again. And then, a lot of European circus clowning is much more theatrical in a way. It's like they have more time, they come on, they can do a whole scene, really. And that's Clown Scenes book that you were talking about, speaks to a golden age of European circus clowning, where they had scripts and they were talking, and they were almost like little scenes, comedy scenes with wonderful clowns and amazing acrobatics. But I don't really know what the state of British circus clowning is right now. Circus in a way is sort of a dying genre, I think. So, and then there's the whole Cirque du Soleil kind of contemporary circus clowning, which is a different thing again, because it's there. You don't really see clowns in recognizable form with red noses and so on. You see much more character-based clowning in Cirque du Soleil, and the clown characters are the ones that carry the whole show. They're the characters that give storytelling and narrative and structure to the entire show, which otherwise is really just a variety show of different amazing acts. So it's circus clowning is many different things.
So this would be a short question, but who are like particular artists that you found interesting that encapsulate those styles? Like the South American, who's an artist that you're like, this is what they're doing. It's really brilliant how they do this.
Yeah. Well, there's a very famous Chilean clown from Chile, whose name I'm completely forgetting right now, but I'm just going to look it up and then I'll be able to tell you. It's that thing where, you know, I'm just in the spotlight and I can't remember. Pastelito, that's his name. Pastelito is one of the most famous clowns in South America, and certainly in Chile. He's like a superstar, you know, celebrity. And he's probably in his 30s. He's pretty young. And that's, like I said, he has this kind of very, very youthful, vibrant, raucous kind of energy, very mischievous. And, you know, a little bit like Viggo in that sense, that he'll go up to people in the audience and kind of like, you know, do like thrusting his hips into people and like being really raunchy and sitting on women's laps and bringing people out onto the ring and doing kind of, you know, pseudo sexual sort of jokes with them. So Pastelito, yeah, he's a Chilean guy. You know, I think in terms of Cirque du Soleil, there've been a bunch of amazing clowns. You know, John Gilkey was an amazing Cirque du Soleil clown. Jeff Raz, Michelle Matlock. These are all people that I've had on my Conversations show, and they've all been stars in Cirque du Soleil shows. The European circus clowns, I'm not so familiar with the names of them. I mean, there's Slava, obviously. Slava is a huge name in clowning. Russian clown. Slava Snow Show is probably the most successful, well-known clown show ever. It's toured. Yeah, it still tours internationally. Slava himself doesn't perform in it anymore. He has other people, other actors or clowns who perform the main role, but they're always sort of doing versions of Slava. Slava Polunin is his full name.
Okay. What, of all the things that are going on with clowning, I spoke to Zuma Puma on a podcast a while ago, and one of the things with like It is a good film, but I did you see that interview with Dan Lees where they tried to pinhole him to saying clowns a certain thing? But
no,
maybe I could show you it. Let me see if I can find it. Dan Lee's interview on clowning, but it's a misunderstood art form.
Yeah.
And what's the thing that sort of you find irritating about it from when I can't find a clip yet, but what's the thing you find irritating about it when you get people from outside of clowning trying to ask you about clowning? Like they say, oh, is it all just Krusty the Clown or It?
Yeah, I mean, there's all these kind of misunderstandings of what clowning is based on that movie. That movie did a lot of damage, but I think it goes much deeper than that, because I think there is clown costume in the US has been a Halloween costume for a long time, you know, a sort of horror image. And I think that there is kind of something about clowns that is inherently a little bit scary long before that Stephen King movie. And I think maybe it speaks to the power of clowns, that clowns, for example, in Native American societies, clowns are feared. You know, we laugh at them and we love them, but we also fear them for good reason. And the reason is that they have this ability to speak the truth. And think about it. Like, most of us are terrified of the truth. We don't want people to know the truth about us, our real nature. We spend a lot of time hiding that, right? We spend a lot of energy trying to come across as a certain image or a way that we want people to see us in the world. And if the clown comes in and is able to peel back that mask and show what we're really like, maybe in a very literal way in some cases, you know, like clowns, and you hear stories of Native American clowns actually in a public forum, like in a public square or even in somebody's house, acting out a shameful thing that a person in the audience has done as a way of punishing them publicly, as a way of kind of shaming them publicly. So there is this danger, this aspect of danger that clowns bring into the world, because they say they might reveal our true nature. They speak the truth. And I think that my theory anyway is that this whole scary clown, fearful clown, horror clown thing actually is rooted in some deep unconscious awareness we have of the clown's power to reveal things we don't want people to see.
Effectively, we all have a dark side, and the clown, and we all have a stupid side, and it makes us feel uncomfortable truths about ourselves, because what we don't want to hear, effectively.
Yeah. And you know, my sort of goal with my business, with Clown Spirit, which if you don't mind me sort of talking about that a little bit, is to re-educate people around clowning, what clowning is. Like, I want people to understand the depth and the power and the integrity of clowning. People, not just clowns themselves, who already know, but the public, you know, the world in general. So that's a big part of my mission in my business, Clown Spirit.
And with the Clown Spirit, with Clownversations podcast, what have they both taught you? Because I found, like, doing a podcast is being amazing in some ways, because as you said, I've had a lot on here, and I've learned things about comedy and about other things that will probably take me years to figure out had I not had some of the great people I've had on there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm learning things from people all the time. It's amazing. I mean, every week I get to have these magical, deep conversations with these great artists and wonderful people. I mean, every week, you know, I learn something new. Trying to think of one example. I had there's this wonderful German clown called Gardi Hütter, who's female, very, very well known in Germany, and it's theatrical clowning, really. She creates whole full-length theater shows with just her, just solo shows, where she's in clown and she's presenting. She has these amazing sets that she has built for her, which are whole worlds, you know, different and different themes that she inhabits, and it's a kind of storytelling, mostly silent. There's some kind of gibberish, some sounds, but she doesn't really speak in words. Anyway, her interview with her was amazing. And I remember one of the things she said, which has always stuck with me, is that clowning, like, is really like any creative process. When she's starting to make a show, she finds that there comes a point where she has to share this idea with other people. So she can have an idea that's kind of going around inside her head, but then at some point she has to, like, gather a group of people together and sort of tell them about her idea. And then in the telling of the idea, she finds out whether it's a good idea or not. And then she can go back to the idea and refine it or change it or whatever. But it was just really interesting that there's something inherently communal, about the creative process, that we can't somehow just do it on our own and then just put it out there. There has to be this kind of conversation, this communication back and forth. And I think that's one of the things I love about clowning and art in general, right? Is it's this way of communicating and connecting with one another on this deep level, and a level that's not to do with the sort of the banality of everyday life, of just like work and money and eating and all these things. It's to do with it has this sort of more profound quality. So yeah, I learned so much from all these people every time.
One thing I've found about the podcast is that I never know what's going to happen before it goes on. And it's always surprising, the guests that will give great, like there's so many things that they would say, things that you wouldn't expect from them if you were judging people on the surface level. And there's things that I've kept in my head for many years from it. But what do you think, what's been a moment where someone's like, because you've been amazed at the impact you've had, like on your followers or people that have done your course? What's been something that's happened recently where someone's gone, Barnaby King, like, I used to be a road man, now like you turned me into a priest?
Yeah, I get quite a lot of that. It's very cool and very satisfying. I have a program that I run called Clown for Life. And Clown for Life is a coaching program, basically. People are paying kind of a subscription, like a membership, to be part of the program. And they come to these weekly coaching sessions, and online. It's all on Zoom. And it's usually a group of, however many people come that week. And we tackle whatever projects or questions individuals in that group have that, going on. And over time, it's amazing what you see. People are coming in to the beginning of that program with almost no experience sometimes, or very little experience, or sometimes more experience, but those with no experience. And within like 6 months or a year, they are performing, like doing clown work in public or in different spaces, or just making creative work and putting it out into the world. One of my clients, for example, is a year ago had never clowned before, and she came into the program and she started creating these little 5-minute pieces for private events in her life that were happening in her life. So there was some kind of party, there was like her husband's birthday, there was some kind of anniversary, different family and community events. And she would plan specific clown routines that were quite carefully scripted, that we created them in these coaching sessions. We honed them over a number of weeks. And then she would go into this event that was on a particular date and do the piece and video it, so that then the next week she would bring the video back, so we could all, in the coaching session, we could all watch how it went. And she's done, I think, 4 or 5 of those. And each time it just she kind of pushes the boat out more, and takes more risks and gets better. And it's just incredible how much joy you see in her, just like how much release and pleasure and kind of fulfillment she's getting from doing this, and how much skill she's developed in 1 year is also kind of incredible. These videos we're watching of her work is lovely. And now she's just told me in the last couple of weeks that she feels like she's ready to create a longer piece now, like her own, more like a clown show, instead of just these little vignettes in different places she wants to create. So there's stories like that. A lot of people who come into my work. I got another email from somebody recently who said that because I teach this clown red nose meditation, I call it, which is a series of breaths and movements that call in your clown energy. And I taught it to her maybe 3 years ago. And she emailed me to say she uses it all the time. And it helps her so much to get through the day, to get through her life. And that she sometimes, when she's having difficulty with her kids, for example, like a difficult moment at work, she'll just do like a 10-second version of the red nose clown meditation, and it'll ground her and help her come back into her sort of light energy and to deal with those moments. And she was just writing to me to sort of thank me for giving her this really practical tool in her life. So yeah, it's very cool. I loved what I do and having this potential to kind of really impact people's lives and give people benefit.
Do we get a 10-second teaser?
of the red nose clown meditation? Yeah. I mean, it's really very simple. So all you're doing is you're breathing the 6 directions. And so with the first direction, which is north, you're imagining breathing in through your feet and up through your body, but it's more like the energy, right? It's breath, but it's also the energy coming up through your legs. And then you breathe it out through your belly, straight out into the world in front of you like that. So that's just one of the directions of 6. And it's north. And the 6 directions, right? North, south, east, west, above, and below. And each direction has its own breath, and it brings a different quality of the clowning. And it can even be different each day you do it. But for me right now, like if I imagine, it'd be different if I was standing up even. I'm sitting down right now, but breathing in through the feet and the legs, and then breathing out into the world. It kind of immediately takes me into a place of like, a bit like amazement and wonder, also like power, but a kind of clownish power, right? Like I can manipulate the world. I could change the world. Gives me this feeling. And then I might go into south and it would give me a different feeling, and east and west. So yeah, there's a little
teaser.
Glimpse.
But more of that, you have to pay him, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I do teach that stuff for free sometimes. I teach free workshops occasionally, very occasionally. So if you want to know about those, you can just go to my website and join the mailing list. My website is www.clown-spirit.com. And you'll be very quickly asked to join the mailing list if you go to that website. And if you're on the mailing list, you'll find out about all these lovely things that I do, paid stuff, but also free stuff.
Yeah. And wow, that's guys, you know, that's been Barnaby King. So you know where to go to find out about him. And if there's any what is the biggest thing? How has clowning changed you? And what is one bit of advice you give to performers listening up there now?
Oh gosh, so many things that clowns changed me. In some ways, I've always been a really serious person. This takes me back to the first question you asked me, right? About why I decided to be a clown. I think I've always been a really serious person. When I was a kid, people would come up to me and say, hey, why the sad face? Or things like that, or like, cheer up. It could be worse, really annoying things people say. And I'm like, this is just how my face looks. I'm not unhappy. But I have always been a serious person. I've taken myself and my life quite seriously. And that can be a really good thing, right? I don't want to diss that. I don't want to say you shouldn't take your life seriously, because frankly, you've only got one. And if you're not going to take it seriously, what's the point? But at the same time, the clown has taught me to take it seriously, but also to kind of realize that that you have to let go of stuff, I think, is one way of putting it. You have to rise above the petty squabbles and frustrations and jealousies and disappointments and regrets and all those things. Like this ability to kind of bring a lightness, to bring a sense of fun and playfulness, and like, hey, we can be in the shit and still have fun. We can be in the shit together, and it can be a pleasurable, joyful experience. So, psychologically, it's helped me a lot, therapeutically, cathartically, as a person, my self-development, to not take myself so seriously all the time. Because I fuck up all the time. I screw up all the time, just like everybody. So if I was to take myself seriously all the time, I'd be miserable, because I'm like failing a lot. So maybe my advice would be along those lines, like, fail. Don't be afraid to fail. Just do what gives you pleasure. Lean into what you desire and what's fun and enjoyable for you. And don't be afraid of that. Don't feel like it's not legitimate or allowed because it's fun. So you've got to work hard, but you've also got to have fun. And if you can do both at the same time, maybe that's the thing, Marvin. Can you find the thing that you love doing so much that you're willing to work really hard at it? Work at having fun. If you can find that thing, you've really got the gold,
That's great, man. It's brilliant. Now, for anyone that wants, you've given the details of your course, but is there anything else that you'd like to plug in the episode for anyone that's listening in now? I've got around 100 of people from across the world listening in on this. So
yeah, just come on over and check us out. I mean, there's also a Facebook group called The Way of the Clown, which is run by Clown Spirit. So come and join the Facebook group. There's a lot of fun stuff going on there. The Way of the Clown. Check out YouTube channel, which is Clown Spirit. And that's where you'll find the Clownversations that are weekly live streams with different clowns. And also, obviously, there's about 70 of them that I've done already, so they're all there. But if you want to get deeper into clowning, then I have this really cool program, which it's the thing that I'm most excited about at the moment, and I haven't even mentioned it yet. And it's called Clown X. This is one I'd recommend for you, actually, Marvin. Clown X is masterclasses with great clown teachers every month. So each month we have a different clown teacher, and these are like top level clown teachers, people like Avner the Eccentric, who's one of the best clowns. He's a beautiful, funny object manipulator kind of clown, American. Anyway, he's one of the people who taught. Every month, it's a 2.5 hour Zoom class with just packed full of technical information, advice, practical exercises, and on different themes each month. And it's super affordable. I mean, you can pay monthly or you can pay annually and get it even cheaper. So if you're interested in that at all, again, you can find it on my website, which is clown-spirit.com, you'll see Clown X as one of the options there on that website. And yeah, it's a growing community of people as well. There's about, I think, about 70 people at the moment who are part of that program. So every month when you come on the Zoom call, there's a bunch of other clowns there all doing their thing, and it's a really nice kind of community feeling. And then we have a teacher leading us through a different session. But then there's also the Clown for Life program that I mentioned before, which is more of the coaching. And then I also teach this 8-week course, which I mentioned earlier, called the Clown Connection. And that's just a group of 10 people. Twice a year, I teach that. And it's got these 8 units on these different kind of approaches to clowning. And it's more of a deep dive into clown.
Is that in person or it's online? It's online, isn't it?
It's all online, yeah. I mean, I occasionally teach in person, mostly locally here. I occasionally go abroad and teach something somewhere, but these days I'm just doing it all online and loving it.
Nice and effective. Like, boom, it's there.
Yeah, and it's a market, I think people need it because not everyone has a clown workshop. Not everyone lives in London or New York or wherever there are clown workshops going on. People need this stuff wherever they are, and everyone's got an internet connection.
Yeah, you're making clown more accessible.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Now, guys, I hope you've enjoyed Barnaby. I've certainly enjoyed it. It's definitely been an eye-opener in certain aspects. You know where to go. Give this podcast a review and 5-star review on Amazon or iTunes. And make sure you follow the next episode, because the next guest is going to be a comedy promoter who's come from Canada all the way to Singapore. So, I'll see you guys soon.